How do you do? My name is Steven. I'm one of the boots here at Wheaton Labs, and today is Wednesday, the 16th of October, 2024, and I wanted to give a quick debriefing on our GAMCOD project for this year. So this is what it looks like right now, including cats running all over the place, and there's a whole bunch of them hanging out over there too. Here's what it looks like after the harvest is done. We have a handful of daikon radish, looks like mostly seed pods in here, so those really didn't count. I wanted to grab those and have seeds for next season. But here is what we've done with it since then. Our season was apparently pretty successful. So with 3 different types of plants, we ended up with over 20,000 calories, and then if we expanded this Hugel's output to an entire acre, we hypothetically would have generated 4.4 million calories, something like that. I did the math, and I didn't quite believe it, because I was looking at our Hugel this year, and I was thinking to myself, I don't think it's going to make it. But again, we had some superstars in the garden. We had, if you recall from other video updates that I've done, or photographs, you would see that there were Hugels. I'm sorry. If you remember from previous video updates I'd done, you would remember seeing a bunch of sunchokes planted along the top row there. And by far, I think that the sunchokes were the superstars. Going by the numbers, they were specifically, approximately half of our calories came from those sunchokes. So that's over 10,000 calories right there. We also had pumpkins that did quite well. They also, they generated a lot of weight, some, pretty good harvest. But in terms of calories, they were not so much. A cool thing about pumpkins, however, is that you have pumpkin flesh and you have pumpkin seeds. So if you look at the calorie count for just flesh, yeah, it's not very impressive. However, one of our guests who was here, they took apart, we had 2 varieties of pumpkins. They took apart, one of each of those varieties, weighed out the pumpkin seeds and the pumpkin flesh that was peeled separately, and then they came up with the calorie amounts for those different components to the pumpkin. And that helped the pumpkins definitely amp up their calorie count. So that was also, so it was sunchokes that blew everything else out of the water. The pumpkins were impressive. And we also had potatoes. The potatoes, we had maybe half a dozen plants, and I can't recall exactly how much, but again, it was kind of an underwhelming harvest. I think that the pumpkins were, I think that the potatoes were just about par for the course for what I was expecting. And I had done the math for the calories, and it far exceeded my expectations. Of course, Paul would would say, "Oh, I expected more," and of course he expects more. But most of the boots had very little gardening exposure, gardening experience, so I kind of managed my expectations, and I had figured that we wouldn't be so attentive, or if we were mulching, maybe we wouldn't be as thorough, and so on. But it turned out we did okay. Again, based on the numbers, we did well. Paul also asked me what were some of the things that I would change for next year, and in fact I am planning on having, oh, here's little Nada. Go ahead, little buddy. Anyhow, Paul had asked me what would I change to do even better than this past year, and one of the things that I suggested that I think will be very effective and a major change would be for us to do some seed starting indoors. Because what we did with this particular hugel is we did a lot of direct seeding. We just basically dropped the seeds right into that dirt. And yes, it is dirt, but I think that was to the seed's detriment, because the only seeds that did well were ones that were very large and had their own energy source already packed into the seed. For example, the pumpkin seeds are the biggest ones we had. Then there were sunchoke tubers and potato tubers. And all those things have energy to carry them through when the soil doesn't really have much going on with it. So things like kale, the radish seeds actually surprised me, but we did have other radishes. We had beets, we had amaranth somebody was trying to grow in there. None of that stuff came through. So direct seeding is not something that's going to do well for a number of different plants. So my goal is to do some seed starting indoors next year. That's the biggest change, I think. Paul has also talked about something that we can try in terms of starting seeds outside, and my nickname for it already is Hot Rock Hill. And one of the things that he suggested is to essentially, you take big rocks and you heat them up on a rocket mass heater. For those of you who don't have one of those, you would heat it up on like a conventional wood stove or something like that. But anyhow, you make that rock nice and hot, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you lay it on the ground, and then you plant your seeds next to that rock. And then at the end of the day, you bring those rocks inside and you heat them up again the following day, drop them next to those where the seeds have been planted the following day. The goal is that because here in Montana there is like a drastic temperature swing from the daytime to throughout the night. Having that rock nearby would warm up the soil and maybe kickstart some of the things that were living in there, some of those organisms, but also it would help baby the seeds a little bit. So that's something that we're going to try. But again, I think that the biggest thing that's going to make a big difference is starting seeds indoors. That way it'll give those seeds that are small, that don't have their own energy source, a little bit more coddling before they're strong enough to hang out on their own. As soon as you have your seedlings ready to go, you do this thing called hardening off, which is basically you acclimate them to the temperature in the outdoors. So you'll take your seedlings after, for example, something that's this tall. You'll go ahead and take those seedlings and you set them outside in the sun for about an hour, hour and a half. And then you bring them back inside to that controlled environment. And then the next day, you bring them outside for a little bit longer, say 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Anyhow, you continue to expand the amount of time, or increase the amount of time that those seedlings are out in the open, getting used to the environment. Eventually, you have them out there for a full day, then you have them out there a full day and overnight, with the hopes that by that time, a week and a half later, those plants will be more acclimated to the outdoor temperature, and so that's when you would transfer them into the hugel, which I am looking at again right now. So those are the things that we're going to try differently. So plans for this hugel that's already here, I want to keep it going. I think it did very well. Again, based on the numbers, it did great. I know for a fact that we'll miss we did not harvest all of the sunchokes that are in there. So we probably have sunchokes, we probably have potatoes in there. Those are the kinds of things that are going to be growing for us next year as volunteers. I doubt we'll have pumpkins because they don't have exterior seeds, they don't have tubers. But we'll have stronger soil in here. So this is going to be one of our regular hugels from now on, I think. It's smaller compared to the typical standards that we have here. It's just about 5 feet tall and almost 8 feet wide. That was the constraints. That's what these little yellow markers are for. We have these markers here to mark the 8 foot wide distance. So that's the width, and the length is 25 feet long. And this is 1/207th of an acre. And anyhow, the fact that it is a 5-foot tall hugel is kind of promising, because up until now we've been growing stuff on privacy berms essentially. So if you've ever seen photos of the hugels that are over at base camp, they're really tall, like in excess of 10 feet. However, I think that this GAMCOD project of ours provides some evidence that says that you don't need to have a hugel that is massively tall in order to grow well. And in fact, I have stewardship of a plot here at the lab right now, and I think that for a while I wasn't persuaded that hugels were the way to go. But after the GAMCOD project, we've got some 5-foot tall hugels in my future for certain. I think that it grew exceptionally well for this particular climate, and it did well on foods that I like to eat. Potatoes specifically, and certainly pumpkins. I love putting pumpkins in sauce. I love eating pumpkin chips, actually. I found that out, that they're pretty tasty. Anyhow, our GAMCOD project was a success this year. So the good things are that we had over 4 million calories, expanded hypothetically over an entire acre. The things to improve would be increasing diversity of the plants by having some seedlings started indoors, and then we'll bring them outside after we've hardened them off to match up with the climate. And that's it for this particular update. Thanks for those of you who were watching and who cheered me on or gave me guidance and suggestions and help throughout the entire growing season this year. Looking forward to doing the same and even better next year. Thanks again.